What's up, guys? It's Amanda, and happy Artsy Fartsy Friday. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video, I am going to really try and stay focused and on task and really only comment on what is actually happening in the video. And the reason for that is I really want to take a minute to talk about this theme and this series that I do in my art that has a lot of personal meaning to me, and I don't think it's something that I've actually taken the time to discuss with you guys here on my channel. Briefly, I just want to mention that this is part one of a two-part video. Part two will be up in a few weeks, so stay on the lookout for that and make sure that you're subscribed if you aren't already. But let's get into part one. So the title of this video is Outer Self. Now, what does that mean to me necessarily? It means that my outer self is something that is temporary. It's something that is, in a lot of ways an expression of myself, but purely aesthetic. It's not necessarily who I am, what my values are, my beliefs, my fears, my aspirations. It's really just what I am at face value, literally. And I started playing around with this concept, and it sort of morphed into this series that I created called My Mother Thinks I'm Morbid. Now, the series name doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the series itself, but it was brought about because when I started thinking about the outer self, I also started thinking about the inner self and how I would represent that. And I chose to represent the inner self by representing literally what is underneath our skin. And you'll see more of that in part two, so I will save that explanation for part two. But what this series is really based on is a lot of the ideas about vanitas and how beauty is temporary, and our youth is sort of something that is fleeting, and it's obviously not permanent, but we try and preserve it, or we only appreciate it when it's at its prime, that sort of thing. And a lot of times in vanitas work, you will see wilting flowers, rotting fruit, and that just kind of goes to show, with the example of flowers, we love flowers, we adore them, we worship them, but only when they're at their prime. Nobody ever brings you a bouquet of flowers that haven't bloomed yet, or a bouquet of flowers that have already died. So that just kind of goes to show kind of how we look at physical beauty, and how much we admire it and how much we sort of forget about it once it's no longer what we consider beautiful. But I wanted to take this theme a step further and really show that who I am on the outside and who I am on the inside should be considered equal. And so what I did was I created these two pieces, and they're sort of mirror images of each other. Only one version is a living version and one version is a presumably dead person, but the symbolism behind that is that it's the inner self and the outer self. So that's sort of where the name came into play with the My Mother Thinks I'm Morbid thing, because when I was first exploring this concept back in 2012, 2013, my mother was a little bit concerned. She saw me drawing a lot of skulls and using a lot of red in my artwork, and she just sort of assumed that maybe I was depressed, which is a fair assumption. Red is a very powerful color, and it might be symbolic of death or blood to some people, but to other people it's symbolic of passion and love. And that's really what it means to me. Red is such a powerful, powerful color, and it really stands out to me. And I love using red as a symbol in my artwork a lot of the time. And maybe you've picked up on that, maybe you haven't. And those of you who have been following me for years, you know a little bit more about this series already. And you've really seen it sort of develop over the years. So if you've been a longtime follower of mine, comment down below, because that would just kind of make my day. I think that that's really cool, because this was not really something I ever intended on turning into a series or a theme, but it just sort of happened, and I don't know, it's really cool. And I just want to take a quick second to talk about how stressful it was to paint these. They're technically not that detailed. It wasn't a difficult piece on a technical level, but the materials that I were using were not the best. I was working on a cheap wood board, and I used this gesso that was not really intended to be used with watercolors, or it was just really poor quality. I'm not really sure, but the watercolor paints ended up looking really, really muddy, and I was able to salvage it in the end, but it took a lot of work to get it to look how I wanted it. So if you see me kind of going back over these same areas over and over again, and you're like, oh my God, what are you doing? I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to salvage it and make it look how I wanted it to look. But yeah, I told you I try and stay on task, but I just had to mention that. And if you watch my vlogs, you will hear me complain about how dreadful this watercolor painting was. So yeah, but another symbol that I use a lot in this series, kind of tying back to Vanitas, is flowers. And so in this version of the painting, I drew the girl with flowers in her hair, and the flowers are more vibrant, and you'll see sort of the parallel to that in part 2. I thought about putting them both in the same video so that you would really be able to see them side by side, but I almost think it's best that I do it separate. That way I can kind of address the theme in 2 parts, because this theme is really all about the contrast and the parallels, you know, life and death, and inner and outer self. So I think it's kind of best that I divide it into 2 parts. That way I can really just take the time to explain each part in and of itself. And hopefully I'll have a few minutes in part 2 of the video to kind of tie both of them together. But that's pretty much it. I mean, we're nearing the end of the video, and you will see a look at the final painting at the end, and also these pieces will be available for sale in my online store, which is always linked down below, and it's also linked at the end of each video, so you should be sure to check that out too. If you haven't checked out my store, then I strongly encourage you to. I'm currently trying to get rid of a lot of my old prints. So yeah, check it out. Here is a look at the finished piece, and I will see you guys next week with some brand new videos. Bye!